Well, hey everybody, I'm the Crockett Cooner, and this is the Crockett Coonhound Show. You've made it to Fireside Chats with the old Cooner here. It's January the 30th, 2025, guys. And for folks that are new, welcome. For folks that have just found me, guys, if you want to watch all my content, I tried to date it there at the first so you can somewhat watch it in succession. And for folks that have been around for a while, I'm talking about a topic tonight, guys, that I love. And I don't really know what I want to say on the topic. You saw it there at the front of the video. I am talking about invasive species, primarily here in the United States, and animals that are wildlife that are where they're not usually at. That could be that they are in fact, in an area in the United States where they haven't been in centuries, or then again, they've never been before, but for some reason they're showing up. And guys, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know what I want to say about this, because a lot of folks, they're like, don't hurt the invasive species. Leave them there. Other folks say, well, they're messing up all the natural animals in their habitat. And then other folks are saying, yes, but there's other things we can do with them. You can catch them. You can, keep them. You can turn around, use them in different hobbies and things. And I'm going to get into that, guys. Now, first of all, I'm going to start this video off like this for the good folks down in Florida. If you're like the old Cooner here and Scooter, and you like to look at nifty little factoids on things, guys, if you want to see something really interesting, get on old Uncle Google, or here on Facebook, or YouTube. I'm found at both places, by the way, and go over and check out the invasive species list in Florida. The last time I was there, guys, it was about a page and a half, maybe 2 pages worth of invasive animals. Now, that's everything from snakes, reptiles, frogs, certain little types of, rodents, and I don't know what all. Aquarium fish that you would see in the aquarium hobby. If you guys have never seen it here on YouTube, you can in fact go check that out. There's a ton of folks in Florida that are in the aquarium business. They're like, you know what? They go out to places like little backyard ponds, little ponds on golf courses. They'll go to drainage ditches just out behind a local box store, a local drug store. You'll see those guys back there doing a little fishing or sitting out a fish trap, and the next thing you know, they pull up a fish that's naturally indigenous to South America, naturally indigenous to Africa, Asia. It's very interesting, guys. Now, most everybody knows that they do, in fact, have like ball pythons, and reticulated pythons, I believe it is, there in Florida. But there's other things, guys. I did see a little bit of a post about a marina type of worm. See, here in America, we don't really think that much about worms, but there are some pretty deadly worms out there. Worms now that are like an earthworm, but these things will bite you more like a leech. It's pretty interesting. And anytime an animal, like say the Asian carp, for instance, gets in the waterways and then they hear a boat motor coming, well, they start jumping out of the water and those types of things. But there's other animals, guys. Now, I don't want anybody to think that I'm picking on the state of Florida, because I'm not, because I like a lot of those folks down there, and I know a bunch of them. Used to do a little coon hunting down that way. But I've got to admit, here in America, we generally adapt, because what are you going to do? But now there's some other species and other animals that are in areas, and kind of hybridized animals that many folks may not know about, and that's why I'm making this Fireside Chat, just to kind of make you aware of it. Now, a lot of the northern states, guys, they have what's called a snakehead fish. And if you have never seen one of those, there's different varieties of them. There's like king snakeheads and northern snakeheads, and I believe there's one called a giant snakehead. But to tell you guys about it, in my opinion, it's a mixture of a pike and a catfish. But if I'm not mistaken, somebody could tell me in the comments down below, they're originally from Asia. Now, if you've never seen one of these, I suggest you go Google that one too, guys, because These fish can get up to being about 4 feet long. The body of them similar to a catfish, but yet different. I mean, in my opinion, as an outdoors person, Scooter's the same. You can look and say, I don't think these are local boys. But they, when they get grown, can have a head about as wide as my hand, and I'm a pretty good sized guy. And if you open up their mouth, they got little teeth, and they're highly aggressive. That's the thing about them, guys. A lot of folks in the aquarium business, in the aquarium trade, they would tell you really quick, lots of folks keep certain types of snakehead fish. You can see videos of it here on YouTube. But when you take this animal and you put it into the wild in a place, because they are considered, I read this somewhere, it may not be so, guys, but as far as freshwater fish go, they're one of the top apex predators. I mean, they are, in fact, down in Florida. A lot of folks fish the canals down there, and you put a good topwater plug in front of this guy, and as soon as it comes into his area, he's just whammo, and he's got it, and it's quite interesting. A lot of folks, I followed a gentleman here from Florida, because they have a lot, was showing how to make iguana curry, because they actually went out on an iguana hunt. Now, iguanas, are they natural to America? I don't think so, but we have a breeding population now. And what I found very interesting about the snakehead fish is, for years we didn't have them here, because there's a snakehead and a bowfin. We didn't have them here in the great state of Tennessee, but lo and behold, guys, I believe it was last night, I took a little look, and sure enough, they said that they have them over in Chattanooga now. Now, that's what makes this animal very interesting. Mother Nature and adaptations to things, guys. If you're not one of these folks that are in tune with those types of things and keep up with it, the snakehead, as long as he somewhat stays damp where they come from there in Asian countries, at certain times of the year when they have monsoons, well, that's great. And then other times when it gets extremely dry, this particular fish, even though he has gills, can sit up on top of the water and breathe air. They can also live out of the water for 4 days, as long as they somewhat stay damp, and they can flippity flop theirself. I believe I read one time about a mile or two till they can find another place where they can live. So if you had 2 ponds, say for instance, one of them dried up because it was smaller, and that's where this particular fish was at, the snakehead, and it started drying up there in the drought. Well, as long as he was good and wet before he left, he could flop about a mile to another pond and say, hey, I live over here now. And if you have a male and a female of the species, guess what? You now could have a breeding population. So I find that to be very interesting, guys. But there's other little, invasive species that people don't think about. Now, here in Tennessee, we have many insects. We have some beetles, if I'm not mistaken, that came from Japan. They look much like a little ladybug. The old ladybugs looked, but they do in fact like to come inside your home, and they also pack a bit of a wallop if they bite you, along with the little stink bugs. I think a lot of folks have seen those. I don't know the exact proper term for them, but they can squeeze through any crack, and they're not native to Tennessee, but we have them now along with other animals such as fire ants and armadillos. They've showed up in the past year. The fire ants came, and from what we heard, the armadillos came looking for them. So, they can do some destruction out in the field when they want to dig a hole. But the funny thing about it is where they come from, originally on down toward Mexico generally, and I would have said years ago they don't get as much snow, but hey, these little guys learn to adapt. They're like, we like it here in Tennessee, so they decided to stay, But something that I found quite interesting, I wanted to mention to you guys. Now, I love the aquarium hobby, guys, and I myself do. In fact, there in the old homestead, I have a Jack Dempsey fish, and for folks that don't know what that is, it is a South American cichlid. Now, when I bought this fish, there at the pet store, it did say highly aggressive and territorial, and I did my homework like everybody else. I did a little Googling to make sure, because in times past, years past, I'd had Oscar fish and these types of things, and I wanted to set my fish up a habitat that was all natural, and I wanted to, kind of make it look very realistic to where he came from and make him a very healthy fish and things. But in all of my research about the Jack Dempsey fish, come to find out, if I'm not mistaken, you guys can go check me out on this because it was a couple weeks ago that I read it. Apparently out in Colorado, in a mountain stream, they now have Jack Dempsey fish, and those are South American cichlids. Well, if you look at the water parameters and things in South America, roughly between about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. It's kind of a warm tropical day there, and when it rains and floods and floodplains and things get wet, there's a lot of sticks and these types of things in the water where this particular fish lives naturally. Well, apparently back, I guess it was the late 90s, somebody turned some of them loose in a stream there in Colorado, and the officials there did what they could to, in fact, go remove them and stuff. And they said, well, they'll probably never live there in Colorado because of the way the temperatures are. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, somebody from Colorado would have to tell me on this, but the natural springs there in the wintertime can get like minus degrees, is like 20 degrees. I mean, even flowing water can start to freeze. And those particular fish found where there were underground springs coming in, the water temperature was a bit warmer than the temperature there in the higher column of water. They just went down and stayed, and here it is 2024-25, and they went back and checked, and they had fish about the size of your finger. So that means there's now a breeding population of Jack Dempsey fish that adapted to the climates of Colorado to live. So, for folks that are biologists and things, they're continuously studying this, because a lot of folks say, well, what does it matter if a species like that gets loose where it's never been loose before? Well, a good example with the snakeheads, I guess when it comes to little bluegill and perch and all of this, here in the state of Tennessee, I don't think they're much of a match to one of them. I do know that in the state of Alabama, in years past there on the Tennessee River, in certain areas where there were factories and the water stayed extremely warm, if I'm not mistaken, somebody caught a piranha, red-bellied piranha, one time down there. And I think that was just a one-time deal, but I'm not sure. There may be other reports of it. But moving on a little bit, guys, to bigger animals, to larger animals and those types of things, there's tons of reports, even here in my area, guys, where folks have said, hey, I've seen a large black cat, much like a panther. I've heard other people say jaguars, and those came from South America, and they traveled all the way up through Mexico over into the state of Texas, and a lot of folks have said all the way over to places like North and South Carolina, Virginia, the state of Tennessee. It's a documented thing now, guys. We have animals that are close to our area but haven't been here in centuries. There's been confirmed cougar sightings in the state of Tennessee. We didn't have those for years, and they've come back. They tracked a bunch of them out of the foothills of the Ozarks that had come down here. So, I've always heard, for instance, with white-tailed deer, that a buck deer generally travels about a 6-mile square radius. But see, what if one day it just decides I don't like it there and it just walks straight for, say, 12 miles, or, does that for 2 or 3 days? We never can tell. So I just find that to be a very fascinating topic, how these animals can do this and, move to certain areas. But one thing that Scooter's very passionate about, guys, and I won't tell you the whole story here. I'd rather him tell it. He tells a good story about when he was a young man. came home from, I believe it was work one night, high school age, but old enough to drive. And they had a barn, because, he lived in a very remote area. And there were barn cats, and these were pretty rough and tough old cats, And they took care of the property, kept the vermin away. And Scooter said that he just kind of leaned over or did something, and when he looked up, there was a gigantic bird that just more or less swooped down, grabbed a small cat, and flew off. And, that's not something we really see a lot of here in the state of Tennessee, especially, I'm going to give away our age now, guys, but 27, 28 years ago. I mean, you do have bigger animals, you have hawks and things, but he says the wingspan of this animal was much wider than a hawk, so it makes you kind of wonder, is it something that came from South America? Was it passing through? Could it have that time even been like an eagle that we at that time didn't see a lot of those here in Tennessee? I don't know. But there's lots of animals like that. Many times, people that were breeders or had them, turned them loose. I saw a statistic one time, guys, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that there were more large, and if I'm not mistaken, it's lions in America in captivity than there are wild in Africa. Now that's something to think about, and there used to be an old video clip going around where it was a very metropolitan area. Somebody was on the street walking by a much larger city, who knows where at in America, but somebody took their camera, flipped it up there, and that was a young lion in basically someone's bathroom on about a third floor building, scratching at the window, an African lion, and it was just like a cub, and it kind of makes you wonder, what would you do with that? What would you do with that even if you lived out in the country, much less in a very urban type of area? But I don't know, guys, that's going to bring me to something. Now here's a topic that I feel very, very interested in this particular category, and I know that other folks follow us throughout the internet. One of them, MFK Game Calls. Those guys are very interesting. They do a lot of coyote hunting. They make some good products. I've seen them use them. I've seen a couple of them used. But myself and another gentleman that I used to hunt with years ago, guys, we were in a four-wheel drive pickup, you can imagine, out in the sticks. We were beside a creek. We had already been way back in this property. We were getting out, been doing a little deer hunting, and it got later in the day there. We'd quit deer hunting. It was about 11, and you know how young fellas are. We had worked up an appetite, didn't do any good. We were ready to go home. Well, we got in the truck, and as we were coming back out of dirt road, guys, there was a big hedge road to our left, a bunch of trees. We'd crossed a low water bridge behind us. There was a creek, and there was a big field to the right. Big field road is all we were on, where they bring tractors in. It's not a through traffic road. Looked to our right, and we saw what we believed was a turkey sitting in a field. Now it was probably a good, if I was guessing, guys, 45, 50 yards from us. But it looked like a turkey from behind. We couldn't see a head or anything. Now, my friend was like, "What is that?" And he lived around this area. And the first thing that came to my mind, guys, turkey, right? Looked like a turkey from behind, just like if he had turned sideways, we'd have got a profile. Well, the gentleman that was with me, he was about 17 at the time, and he was a football player. He had hurt his leg, so he got out on his crutches, and he walks around. And he told me, I got out because the animal was on my side. He said, "Hey, buddy, reach in there, get my weapon, and I'm going to scope this thing out. We're just going to see what it is." We wasn't planning on shooting at it or anything, guys. We just want to see what it was. And he took a little look, and no sooner than he put it up there, guys, this animal stood up and turned sideways. And for my coyote people, here's what I'm going to say. Similar to a coyote here in southern middle Tennessee. I've seen many of them, but much larger, much bigger than a German Shepherd. But the same coloration basically as a coyote, but much taller ears. A safe guess, guys, I'm going to say it weighed about 80 pounds, 90. It was big, but it was extremely tall, and it was in a milkweed field. Well, that brings me to coy dogs. Now, you know, the ones that are half coyote, half neighborhood dog. Now, here you go, guys. I have a theory on this one. Does it make it right? It's just my thinking. For those of you that are old enough to remember back, good 25, 30 years ago, there was a big push for people that were owning animals like huskies, those types of dogs, to get like half husky, half wolf. You know, there were breeders, there were people that had these animals. And in that particular area, and years ago, there was a gentleman that had a dog. It was a male dog that was half husky, half wolf. And you could hear this animal at nighttime. They would be coyotes holler, and then you would hear this totally out of place for Tennessee howl, this big whoo, you know. You guys can imagine? And I've often asked myself the question, that particular, I'm going to call it a coyote that we saw that day, guys. Could it have been a court or something else? You know, because from the time that the man's pet had passed away till when we saw it was a good 10 years. But could there have been some DNA there of something that's not originally from here? Something that came from up in Alaska but was brought here as a pet and then bred and reverted back to the wild? I don't know. You know, people have that a whole lot, guys. I do know that here in Middle Tennessee, because I can really talk about our area, there's been quite a few black bear sightings. You know, they've come down out of the mountains and things. One rather close to my home here, guys, and that's confirmed. They called Game and Fish, and they went down there and looked, said sure enough, there was one here, just leave him alone. He'll go back probably to the mountains. You know, North Alabama, that's not really a spot there that you see a ton of bears, but they see them now. So it's quite interesting, guys, as, you know, places expand and there's more human beings, we kind of invade on the wildlife, not to mention the new wildlife that came from somewhere like Africa, Asia, South America, that has decided, hey, I live here now. It's a pretty neat spot, you know. So it kind of makes a person wonder, you know. So part of the reason, though, guys, why I made this video, if you've watched it this long, if you love topics like that, I promise you, the old cooner here and Scooter, we love these things no matter what your story is. If you've got one, guys, you know, maybe you were out hunting, maybe you were out hiking, maybe you're just driving home from work. If you happen to see an animal that seemed out of place for your area, that seemed extremely large for your area, or it was like questionable, you know, kind of like my coy dog, coyote, could it have been something else? Could it have been mixed with a German Shepherd sighting? We don't know. You know, if you got a second, definitely comment it down below, please. It helps out our channel as always, and we can get a conversation going, guys. Now, I know a lot of times I do it too. Everybody likes to sit and look at their phone, but I do love a good live chat, guys. I like talking to everybody. I like to talk to the folks that follow us. I love to talk to other people that are outdoors people, maybe even do something in the outdoors that I don't do, you know, or have never really touched on that much, you know, because there's different outdoor practices all throughout the U.S. and throughout the world. So if you ever have a sighting like that, or you know of one, or you've heard one, even if it's not yours and you feel comfortable telling it, definitely comment it down below. I might even make a video, guys, where I get a bunch of the comments together and just kind of read them back. So, but I'm going to stop it right there, guys. I say it all the time, definitely. Stay safe on the water, stay safe in the woods, and hey, if you're like the old cooner here and you're out doing a little deer hunting and think you see a turkey and it comes out to be a much bigger coyote than you expected, stay safe out there too. And stay tuned here at the Crockett Coonhound Show, and myself and Scooter will have you guys another video dropping shortly. You guys have a great day.